The orange strobe light mounted on my garage caught my eye through the kitchen window as I poured my morning coffee. Its steady pulse cutting through the pre-dawn darkness like a mechanical heartbeat that had saved 3 lives last winter alone. I'd barely set the mug down when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the message making my jaw tighten. Urgent HOA violation. Remove unauthorized emergency beacon within 24 hours or face $500 daily fines. Brenda Whitmore, HOA president. I stared at the message for a solid 10 seconds, then read it again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The beacon in question was standard fire department equipment, the same kind mounted on volunteer firefighter vehicles across Pennsylvania. It had been there for 6 years, ever since I joined the Millbrook Volunteer Fire Department and eventually worked my way up to captain. The thing had guided lost drivers to safety during 3 major blizzards, helped coordinate emergency responses, and was literally approved by the county for exactly this purpose. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. Please acknowledge receipt of this notice immediately. I typed back with more restraint than I felt. This is fire department equipment for emergency response. It's legally authorized. The reply came within seconds. HOA covenants prohibit unauthorized lighting fixtures visible from the street. No exceptions. This is your only warning. I took a long drink of coffee and considered my options. I'd lived in Maple Ridge Estates for 8 years now, moving here right after my divorce when I'd needed a fresh start. The neighborhood sat on the outskirts of Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a comfortable middle-class development of 2-story colonials and well-maintained lawns. For the first 6 years, the HOA had been a minor annoyance at worst, the kind of organization that sent polite reminders about garbage can placement and offered cheerful suggestions about approved mailbox colors. Then Brenda Whitmore had taken over as president 14 months ago, and everything had changed. She'd started small, implementing new restrictions on holiday decorations and outdoor furniture colors. Then came the mandatory lawn treatment program that everyone had to pay for whether they wanted it or not. Last summer, she tried to ban basketball hoops because they were unsightly and encouraged loitering youth. That particular crusade had failed after 3 families threatened legal action, but Brenda had simply pivoted to new targets. Now, apparently, I was in her crosshairs. I grabbed my work jacket and headed out to my truck, a silver Ford F-150 with the Millbrook VFD decal on the back window. The beacon sat mounted on a small platform attached to my garage roof, positioned so it wouldn't blind anyone but remained visible to people who might be lost or in distress during a snowstorm. It was connected to a manual switch inside my garage, dormant most of the year but absolutely critical when winter storms rolled through our part of Pennsylvania. The November morning was crisp and clear, the kind of weather that fooled people into forgetting that we'd be buried under snow in another month. I just climbed into my truck when I noticed a woman standing at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, wearing what I could only describe as an aggressively professional pantsuit in beige. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and she wore an expression that suggested she'd been practicing it in the mirror. Brenda Whitmore. I'd seen her at exactly 2 HOA meetings, both times holding court like a general addressing troops. I rolled down my window. "Can I help you?" Yates Quinlan. She didn't wait for confirmation. "I wanted to ensure you received my message about the code violation. That beacon needs to come down today." "It's fire department equipment," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm captain of the Millbrook Volunteer Fire Department. That beacon is part of my emergency response kit, approved by the county. Brenda's expression didn't shift. I don't care if it's approved by the President of the United States. Our HOA covenants clearly state that no external lighting fixtures beyond standard residential applications are permitted. That includes emergency lights, decorative lights, or any other illumination that creates visual pollution. Visual pollution. I couldn't help the incredulous tone. It's off right now. It's only active during snow emergencies when people need to find help. The device itself is visible and unappealing, Brenda said. Furthermore, when activated, it creates a distraction for drivers and disturbs the peaceful aesthetic of our neighborhood. I took a slow breath, reminding myself that losing my temper wouldn't accomplish anything. Mrs. Whitmore, last February, that beacon helped guide a family with a sick child to my house during a whiteout. I was able to call an ambulance and provide first aid until they arrived. The paramedics said another 30 minutes, and the kid might not have made it. That's very touching, Brenda said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. However, we have emergency services for such situations. Your personal hero complex doesn't supersede community regulations. The dismissive words hit harder than I expected. I'd spent 6 years volunteering my time, missing family dinners and holidays, running into burning buildings and freezing conditions, all to help keep my community safe. And this woman was calling it a hero complex. I'm not taking it down, I said flatly. It's legal, it's necessary, and it saves lives. Brenda's smile was thin and sharp. Then you'll be fined $500 per day starting tomorrow morning. We'll also be filing a formal complaint with the county about your unauthorized use of emergency equipment on residential property. She turned and walked away before I could respond, her heels clicking on the asphalt with military precision. I sat in my truck for a minute trying to process what had just happened. Then I called Tom Rivera, our fire chief and one of the most level-headed people I knew. "Hey, Yates," Tom answered on the second ring. "What's up?" I explained the situation, including Brenda's threat to file a complaint with the county. Tom was quiet for a moment. "She can't do that. The beacon's registered with the county emergency management office. You've got all the proper documentation." "I know that and you know that," I said. "But I'm guessing Brenda Whitmore doesn't care about documentation. Want me to give her a call?" Official fire department business explained the legal situation. I considered it. "Let me handle it first. If she escalates, we might need to make it official." "Your call, but Yates. Don't let her bully you into removing that beacon. We need it, especially with how fast the weather can turn up here." I promised I wouldn't and headed to work, my mind churning through possibilities. I worked as a civil engineer for a consulting firm in downtown Millbrook, spending my days reviewing construction plans and calculating load-bearing requirements. It was steady work, paid the bills, and had flexible enough hours that I could respond to fire department calls when needed. The morning passed in a blur of emails and technical drawings. I was deep into a drainage plan review when my phone rang around 11. The caller ID showed Maple Ridge Estates HOA. "Yates Quinlan," I answered. "Mr. Quinlan, this is Patricia from the HOA management office." The woman's voice was apologetic. "I've been instructed to inform you that the HOA board held an emergency session this morning regarding your property. They voted to impose immediate fines of $500 per day, retroactive to today, and to place a lien on your property if payment isn't received within 30 days. A lien? For a legally authorized emergency beacon? I'm sorry, sir. I'm just conveying the board's decision. You should receive formal documentation via certified mail within 3 business days. Who else was at this emergency session besides Brenda Whitmore?" Patricia hesitated. "Mrs. Whitmore, Gerald Thompson and Lisa Chen. They constitute a quorum under our bylaws. I made a note of the names. Gerald Thompson owned the corner lot on Elm Street, a retired accountant who seemed to spend his days measuring his neighbor's grass height. Lisa Chen, I barely knew, a busy professional who'd probably just gone along with whatever Brenda proposed. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, though I wasn't sure why I was thanking her. After hanging up, I pulled out my HOA documents from the file cabinet in my home office that evening. The covenants were surprisingly thick, a dense collection of rules and regulations covering everything from fence heights to approved shrub species. I found the section on external lighting and read it carefully. The language was vague, prohibiting excessive or inappropriate external illumination that creates visual disturbance or aesthetic disruption. Nothing specifically mentioned emergency equipment. Nothing said anything about beacons or fire department operations. I grabbed my laptop and started researching Pennsylvania HOA law. 3 hours later, after reading through statute after statute and a dozen legal precedents, I had a clearer picture. HOAs in Pennsylvania had significant power to enforce their covenants, but they couldn't supersede state or local laws. Emergency services were specifically protected in most jurisdictions, and volunteer firefighters had certain legal protections regarding their ability to respond to calls. The question was whether my beacon fell under those protections. The next morning, I called a lawyer I'd worked with on a few construction disputes. Marcus Chen, no relation to Lisa, was a sharp guy who specialized in property law. "Yates, been a while. What's got you tangled up this time?" I explained the situation. Marcus whistled low. "Your HOA president sounds delightful. Okay, here's the thing. You're probably protected under Pennsylvania's volunteer firefighter statutes. There's specific language about not impeding a volunteer's ability to respond to emergencies. The beacon's part of your response capability, so it should be covered." "Should be." Well, the law isn't tested often in this specific context. Most cases involve things like sirens on personal vehicles or parking restrictions. I'd need to do more research to be certain. But I can send your HOA a letter explaining the legal situation, which might make them back off. How much would that cost for a letter? Call it $300. If this goes to actual litigation, we're talking $5,000 to $10,000 minimum, maybe more if they really dig in. I thanked him and said I'd think about it. $300 was manageable. $10,000 was not on a civil engineer's salary with a mortgage and a daughter in college. That afternoon, I got the certified letter from the HOA. It was remarkably detailed, outlining my violation, the fines accruing at $500 per day, and the consequences of non-compliance. It also included photos of my house taken from multiple angles, with the beacon circled in red marker like evidence at a crime scene. The letter was signed by all 3 board members. Brenda's signature was noticeably larger than the others. I was reading it for the 3rd time when my neighbor knocked on my door. Robert Martinez lived 2 houses down, a quiet guy in his 50s who worked from home doing something with computers. "Hey, Yates," he said when I answered. "Got a minute?" "Sure, come on in." Robert stepped inside looking uncomfortable. "I heard about the HOA thing with your beacon. Brenda's been calling people trying to drum up support for the fines." "Seriously?" "Yeah. She called me yesterday, wanted me to sign a petition about maintaining neighborhood standards. I told her I didn't see any problem with your light, and she got pretty hostile." He shook his head. "Look, I know we're not super close, but I wanted you to know that not everyone agrees with this crusade she's on. That beacon helped my parents find my house during that storm in February. They'd gotten lost trying to visit, and the GPS kept taking them in circles. Your light was the only thing they could see through the snow. Something in my chest loosened a bit. I appreciate you telling me that. There's going to be an HOA meeting next week. Regular monthly thing. You should come, make your case to the whole neighborhood. Brenda's got a lot of power, but she doesn't speak for everyone. After Robert left, I marked the meeting on my calendar. November 15th, 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse. 1 week to prepare. The next few days were tense. I kept expecting another confrontation with Brenda, but she seemed content to let the fines accumulate. My mailbox did receive a steady stream of passive-aggressive notices about various other violations, including my grass being a quarter-inch too long, and my garbage cans being visible from the street for 3 minutes past the allowed time. On Thursday evening, I had my weekly training session with the fire department. We gathered at the station on Main Street, a modest brick building that had served Millbrook for 60 years. The crew consisted of 18 volunteers ranging from college kids to retirees, all united by the desire to help their community. "Heard about your HOA trouble," said Jessica Hartman, one of our most experienced firefighters. She was a nurse at Millbrook General when she wasn't running into burning buildings. "That's complete garbage." "Brenda Whitmore's a piece of work," added Mike Sullivan, a burly guy who worked construction. "My cousin lives in Maple Ridge." She tried to fine him for having a pickup truck in his driveway, said it wasn't aesthetically appropriate for the neighborhood. Tom called us to attention before I could respond. "All right, people. Let's focus. Tonight we're doing cold weather rescue scenarios. With winter coming, I want everyone sharp on hypothermia protocols and vehicle extraction in snow conditions." We spent 3 hours running drills, practicing techniques that might seem routine, but could mean the difference between life and death when seconds counted. By the time we finished, I was exhausted but felt better. This was real work, meaningful work. Whatever Brenda Whitmore thought about my hero complex, I knew what I did mattered. As I was heading out, Tom pulled me aside. "Got a minute?" We stepped into his office, a small, cluttered space filled with training manuals and equipment catalogs. "I made some calls," Tom said. "Talked to the county emergency management coordinator. Your beacon's definitely legal, and your HOA can't force you to remove it. The coordinator's willing to put that in writing if needed. That would help. There's more." Tom leaned against his desk. "I also talked to a few other fire departments in the area. Turns out you're not the first volunteer to have HOA problems. There's actually been some discussion about pushing for clearer state legislation to protect volunteers from this kind of harassment." "How long would that take?" "Months, maybe years." Tom grimaced. "Not helpful for your immediate situation, but I wanted you to know you're not alone in this. The fire service community has your back." The support meant more than I could articulate. I'd been feeling isolated, like this was my problem to solve alone. Knowing that others understood and cared made the weight a little lighter. The weekend passed quietly. I spent Saturday with my daughter, Zoe, who was home from Penn State for a visit. She was 21 now, studying environmental science and turning into an impressive young woman. Over lunch at her favorite diner, I told her about the HOA situation. "That's insane," Zoe said, her dark eyes flashing with indignation. She'd inherited my temper, though she was better at channeling it productively. "Can't you just tell them to back off? You're literally saving lives. It's complicated." The HOA has legal authority to enforce their rules, and their rules are vague enough that they think they can apply them to my beacon. So get a lawyer and fight it. Lawyers are expensive, sweetheart. I'm already covering your tuition. Zoe set down her burger. "Dad, I can take out loans." Don't let that be the reason you give in to some power-tripping HOA president. I'm not giving in, I assured her. I'm just trying to find the smartest way to handle this. The smartest way is to stand up to bullies, Zoe said firmly. You taught me that. On Monday morning, I woke to find my driveway blocked by a sedan with HOA compliance officer printed on a magnetic door sign. A man in his 30s was taking photographs of my house with a professional camera, paying particular attention to the beacon. I walked out in my bathrobe and slippers. Can I help you? The man lowered his camera. HOA inspection, making sure all violations are properly documented. You're on my property. I didn't authorize you to be here. The HOA covenants grant us access to external areas of all properties for compliance purposes. He consulted a tablet. You're Yates Quinlan. I'm here about the unauthorized beacon and several other violations. Other violations. Your mailbox paint is faded beyond acceptable standards. Your front door wreath exceeds the size limitation for seasonal decorations. And there's a crack in your driveway that needs repair. I looked at my mailbox, which was perfectly fine. The wreath was a simple autumn decoration my mother had given me, maybe 18 inches across. And the crack in my driveway was a hairline fracture barely visible unless you were looking for it. This is harassment, I said. The man shrugged. I'm just doing my job, sir. You'll receive documentation of all violations within 48 hours. He took a few more photos and left. I stood in my driveway, coffee growing cold in my hand, and realized this was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Brenda wasn't just going after the beacon anymore. She was going to nickel and dime me with every petty violation she could invent. That afternoon, I paid Marcus Chen his $300 to draft a letter. He sent it to the HOA that same day, outlining the legal protections for volunteer firefighters and requesting that all fines be waived and the compliance action be terminated immediately. The response came within hours, not from the HOA's lawyer but from Brenda herself via email. Mr. Quinlan, your attempt to intimidate the HOA board with legal threats is noted and will be added to your file. The board stands by its decision. Fines will continue to accumulate. If you wish to dispute this further, you may request a hearing, though be advised that hearing requests must be submitted in writing with a non-refundable $500 processing fee. I read the email twice, my blood pressure climbing with each word. A $500 fee just to request a hearing. That seemed excessive even by HOA standards. Marcus called me that evening. Got the HOA's response. It's pretty aggressive, which actually might work in your favor if this goes to court. But Yates, I need to be straight with you. This could get expensive. If they're willing to fight this hard over a beacon, they might drag this out as long as possible. What would you do? I asked. Honestly, I'd make some noise. Go to that HOA meeting, bring neighbors who support you, get the community involved. Sometimes these things resolve not through legal action, but through social pressure. If enough homeowners think Brenda's overreaching, they might vote her out or force the board to back down. It was good advice. I spent the next few days talking to neighbors, explaining the situation, and asking if they'd be willing to attend the meeting. The responses were mixed. Some, like Robert Martinez, were immediately supportive. Others were sympathetic, but worried about attracting Brenda's attention to their own properties. A few bluntly told me they agreed with the HOA, that rules were rules and I shouldn't get special treatment. By Wednesday, I had commitments from 8 neighbors to attend the meeting and speak on my behalf. It wasn't a majority of the 140 homes in Maple Ridge Estates, but it was something. The day before the meeting, we got our first real snow of the season. Just 2 inches, Nothing serious, but enough to remind everyone that winter was coming. I looked at my beacon that evening, sitting dark and silent on the garage, and felt a surge of frustration. This stupid fight was distracting from what actually mattered. My pager went off at 9 p.m. Structure fire on Hickory Lane, about 3 miles from my house. I grabbed my gear and headed out, arriving at the scene just behind the engine. The house was a ranch-style home, smoke pouring from the kitchen window. The family was outside, safe but shaken. We worked for 2 hours getting the fire under control. It had started with a grease fire on the stove that had spread to the cabinets. The damage was significant but contained, the house salvageable with repairs. As we were packing up, the homeowner, an older woman named Dorothy, approached me. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you so much. My grandchildren were visiting if you all hadn't gotten here so fast." "Just doing our job, madam," I said, the standard response. "No," she grabbed my hand. "It's more than a job. You chose to help people. That means something." I drove home exhausted and covered in soot, the HOA meeting less than 20 hours away. Dorothy's words echoed in my mind. You chose to help people. That means something. The next evening, I arrived at the community clubhouse at 6:45, wanting to be early. The room was already half full, neighbors chatting in small clusters. I spotted Brenda immediately, standing near the front with Gerald Thompson. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Robert Martinez waved me over to a row of seats in the middle section. He'd saved space for our little group of supporters. Jessica Hartman showed up a few minutes later, still in her nurse's scrubs from work, along with 2 other firefighters from the department. At precisely 7 p.m., Brenda called the meeting to order. She ran through standard business: first approval of last month's minutes, a treasurer's report from Gerald, updates on landscaping contracts. The whole time, I could feel her awareness of me sitting in the audience, like a spider sensing vibrations on its web. Finally, she reached the agenda item I'd been waiting for. "We have a significant compliance issue to discuss," Brenda began, her voice carrying easily through the room. "One of our homeowners has repeatedly refused to address a clear covenant violation, despite multiple notices and warnings. This isn't just about one person breaking the rules. It's about whether we, as a community, believe that standards matter." She clicked a remote, and a photo of my house appeared on the projector screen, the beacon circled in red. "Yates Quinlan has installed an unauthorized emergency beacon on his property. When asked to remove it, he refused. When fined, he sent legal threats. This behavior undermines everything our HOA stands for." I felt eyes turning toward me, some curious, others judgmental. "Mr. Quinlan, would you like to address the board?" Brenda's smile was thin and challenging. I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "That beacon is fire department equipment. I'm the captain of the Millbrook Volunteer Fire Department. The beacon is registered with the county and legally authorized for emergency use." "The legality is irrelevant," Brenda cut in. "Our covenants supersede personal career choices." "It's not a career. I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid to risk my life for this community." Murmurs rippled through the audience. I pressed on. "Last February, that beacon helped save a child's life during a blizzard. It's helped lost drivers find safety during whiteouts. It's part of how I can coordinate emergency responses when weather conditions are severe. Taking it down doesn't just affect me, it affects everyone's safety. We have professional emergency services for that," Brenda said dismissively. "Your personal equipment is redundant and violates community standards." Robert Martinez stood up. "I disagree. Yates's beacon helped my parents during that same storm. Without it, they would have been stuck driving in circles in a whiteout. "And who asked you to speak?" Brenda's tone sharpened. "This isn't open forum time." "Actually," said a woman I didn't know well, standing up near the back, "I think we should hear from more people. This affects all of us." "The board has already made its decision," Gerald Thompson said. "We're not here to debate, just to inform the community." "That's not how this is supposed to work," Jessica Hartman called out. "HOA boards are supposed to represent the homeowners, not dictate to them." The room erupted in cross-talk, people standing and shouting opinions. Brenda banged a gavel, her face flushing red. "Order, we will have order." Gradually, the noise subsided. Brenda composed herself, smoothing her suit jacket. "The board's decision stands. Mr. Quinlan will be fined $500 per day until the violation is corrected. If he wishes to formally appeal, he may submit a request with the required processing fee." She paused. "Now, moving on to the next agenda item." "Wait," I said, still standing. "You mentioned I sent legal threats. I sent a letter from my attorney explaining the law. That's not a threat. That's information." "Semantics," Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "And you mentioned other violations. The mailbox, the wreath, the driveway crack. Those are all made-up problems. My property is well maintained." "The compliance officer's report says otherwise." "The compliance officer works for you. He'll say whatever you want him to say." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Quinlan, you're coming dangerously close to slander. I'm stating facts. You're targeting me because I won't back down, so now you're inventing violations to justify your overreach. That's enough." Brenda's voice cracked like a whip. "You are out of order. Sit down or I'll have you removed from this meeting." "Removed by who?" I looked around. "There's no security here. You can't just kick out homeowners for disagreeing with you." "I can and I will." Brenda pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police for a trespasser." "I'm not trespassing. I live here. I pay HOA dues. I have every right to be at this meeting." But Brenda was already talking into her phone, explaining to someone that there was a disruptive individual refusing to leave HOA property. The absurdity of the situation hit me. I'd run into burning buildings, pulled people from wrecked cars, worked through blizzards and heat waves to help my community. And now, I was being threatened with arrest for defending a piece of equipment that helped me do exactly that. 10 minutes later, a Millbrook police officer walked into the clubhouse. Officer Daniel Park, someone I'd worked with on multiple accident scenes and emergencies. His expression was carefully neutral as he approached. "Evening, folks. Got a call about a disturbance. This man is disrupting our meeting and refusing to leave when asked," Brenda said immediately, pointing at me. Officer Park looked at me. "Yates, what's going on?" "I'm a homeowner attending an HOA meeting," I said. "I spoke during discussion of a violation notice against my property." Mrs. Whitmore didn't like what I had to say. Park's eyes flicked between us, clearly piecing together the situation. "Is this an open meeting for homeowners?" "Yes, but," Brenda started. "Then Mr. Quinlan has a right to be here unless he's actually causing a disturbance. Was he threatening anyone?" "Being violent." He was disrespectful and combative. Park suppressed what might have been a smile. "Madam, that's not illegal. If he's a homeowner and this is a homeowner meeting, I can't remove him for speaking his mind." He turned to me. "Yates, maybe just keep it civil, okay?" "That's all I've been trying to do," I said. After Park left, the meeting continued, but the energy had shifted. Other homeowners started asking questions about the beacon, about the fines, about whether the board had the authority to do what it was doing. Brenda tried to maintain control, but her grip was slipping. Finally, a man I recognized as Dr. Stephen Wu, a physician who lived on Birch Court, stood up. "I move that we table any enforcement action on Mr. Quinlan's beacon. until we can get a formal legal opinion about whether the HOA can actually prohibit emergency equipment. This seems like something we should be very sure about before we start fining people hundreds of dollars a day. I second that, Robert Martinez called out. Brenda's face was red. That motion is out of order. The board has already decided. The board works for us, Dr. Wu said firmly. We're the homeowners. You're supposed to represent our interests, not your personal crusades. The room exploded into discussion again. I sat down, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. This was spiraling far beyond what I'd anticipated. Gerald Thompson leaned over to whisper something to Brenda. She listened, her jaw tight, then stood up. Fine. We'll table the enforcement for 2 weeks while we obtain an independent legal opinion. But let me be clear, the board expects all homeowners to comply with our covenants. If we start making exceptions, the entire system breaks down. It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve. 2 weeks to figure out my next move. The meeting adjourned shortly after. People came up to me, some offering support, others looking skeptical. Brenda left without speaking to me, Gerald Thompson trailing behind her like a loyal soldier. That was intense, Robert said, clapping me on the shoulder, but I think you got through to people. Maybe, I said, or maybe I just made things worse. Jessica Hartman shook her head. You did the right thing. Bullies only stop when people stand up to them. Over the next few days, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip about the meeting. I heard from multiple people that Brenda had been calling homeowners, trying to rally support for her position. She was characterizing me as someone who thought he was above the rules, who wanted special treatment because of his volunteer work. The air quotes around volunteer work, reported to me by 3 different sources, made my blood boil. On Tuesday, I got a call from Marcus Chen. Good news and bad news. Which do you want first? Bad news. The HOA hired a law firm, not a small one either, Carter and Associates out of Pittsburgh. They're expensive and they're aggressive. And the good news. I talked to a friend who specializes in nonprofit and volunteer organization law. She thinks you have a really strong case. The Pennsylvania Volunteer Firefighters Relief Association Act has specific provisions protecting volunteers from local interference with their emergency response capabilities. Your beacon falls under that umbrella. So we'd win if this went to court, probably. But it would take months and cost thousands. The HOA knows that. They're betting you'll fold rather than fight. I thought about my savings account, already stretched thin from helping Zoe with college expenses. I thought about the principle of the thing, about letting Brenda Whitmore dictate terms through sheer financial bullying. Let's give them one more chance to back down, I said. Can you send another letter, this time citing the specific statutes? Already drafting it. The letter went out Wednesday afternoon. The response came Thursday morning, not from the HOA's lawyer but from Brenda directly. She'd filed a complaint with the county zoning board, claiming I was operating an unauthorized emergency services facility in a residential zone. She'd also filed a complaint with the state fire marshal, alleging that I was misusing emergency equipment for personal purposes. Both complaints were complete nonsense, easily disproven, but they would require time and energy to fight. Worse, they could potentially cause problems for the entire fire department if the state decided to investigate our equipment authorization protocols. I called Tom Rivera immediately. Don't worry about it, Tom said, though I could hear the tension in his voice. The state fire marshal knows these complaints are bogus. We're fully compliant with all regulations. But yeah, it's going to be a pain in the ass to deal with. I'm sorry. I never meant to create problems for the department. You didn't create anything. Some petty tyrant with too much time on her hands did. We'll handle it. That evening, I sat in my living room and seriously considered just taking the beacon down. It would be easier. The fight would be over. I could go back to my normal life. But every time I came close to making that decision, I'd remember Dorothy's face after we saved her house. I'd remember the family with the sick child who'd found help because of that beacon. I'd remember every emergency where that simple orange light had made a difference. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about whether I was going to let someone bully me out of helping my community. Friday morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed. All 4 of them, cut deep enough that they couldn't be repaired. The damage was clearly deliberate, professional even, done sometime during the night. I called the police. Officer Park came out to take a report, photographing the damage and asking if I had any enemies who might do this. Just my HOA president, I said. Park raised an eyebrow. You think she did this? I think it's an interesting coincidence that this happens right in the middle of our dispute. Do you have any proof? Security cameras. I didn't. The crime had occurred in my own driveway, but I'd never felt the need for surveillance equipment before. Park took his report and said they'd investigate, but I could tell he didn't expect to find anything. Tire slashing was notoriously hard to prove unless someone was caught in the act. 4 new tires cost me $800 I hadn't budgeted for. I charged them to a credit card, adding to the financial pressure this whole situation was creating. That weekend, Zoe came home again. She'd heard about the tire slashing from my sister, who I'd mentioned it to in passing. "Dad, this is getting scary," Zoe said. "What if this person escalates?" "We don't know it was Brenda," I pointed out. "Who else would it be? This whole thing is insane." She paced my living room. "Maybe you should just take down the beacon. It's not worth someone hurting you. I'm not taking it down." "Why? Because you're stubborn." "Because it's the right thing to do," I said. "Zoe, if I back down now, Brenda wins. And she won't stop with me. She'll keep finding targets, keep making up rules to enforce, keep making people's lives miserable because she likes having power over them." Zoe sat down, her anger shifting to worry. "I just don't want anything to happen to you." "Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm being careful." On Monday, the 2-week reprieve from the HOA meeting expired. I received a certified letter informing me that the board had received a legal opinion confirming their authority to regulate external lighting fixtures. The fines would resume immediately, now totaling $8,500 for the 17 days that had passed. The legal opinion was attached. It was 3 pages long, written by a lawyer I'd never heard of, and based entirely on a narrow reading of the HOA covenants without any mention of state law regarding emergency services or volunteer firefighter protections. It was a purchased opinion, the legal equivalent of paying someone to tell you what you wanted to hear. I called Marcus Chen. "They're back at it." I saw. Got the same letter. "Yates, I think it's time to file suit. We can ask for an injunction stopping the fines while the case is pending." "How much?" $5,000 retainer to start. Could go higher depending on how hard they fight. $5,000. Combined with the fines, the tire replacement, the various other costs that had accumulated, this fight was becoming financially devastating. "Let me think about it," I said. That afternoon, I got an unexpected call from Fire Chief Tom Rivera. "Yates, something weird just happened." The county commissioners got a petition signed by 43 Maple Ridge Estates homeowners requesting that the fire department stop using your address as a response coordination point during emergencies. "What? That's not even a thing. We don't use individual addresses as coordination points." "I know that, and you know that. But someone's stirring up fear that your house is somehow an unofficial fire station, that we're staging equipment there, that it creates liability for the neighborhood." "This is Brenda," I said. "She's weaponizing my neighbors against me, probably." The county commissioners aren't taking it seriously, but it's creating noise, making people ask questions about our operations. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Brenda wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was attacking the fire department, trying to undermine community trust in our ability to do our jobs. That crossed a line. I spent the rest of the day making calls. I talked to every firefighter in our department, explaining the situation and asking for their support. I talked to neighbors, both those who'd supported me at the meeting and those who'd been on the fence. I talked to local reporters, suggesting they might want to cover a story about an HOA trying to shut down emergency services equipment. By Wednesday, the story had hit the local news. The Millbrook Gazette ran a front-page article. HOA vs. Fire Captain, dispute over emergency beacon divides neighborhood. The reporter had interviewed me, Brenda, Tom Rivera, and several homeowners. The article was balanced but made Brenda look petty and vindictive. Thursday morning, a TV news crew showed up at my house. Channel 7 out of Pittsburgh wanted to do a segment on the story. I gave them an interview, explained the beacon's purpose, and showed them documentation of lives it had helped save. They also tried to interview Brenda. She declined, but they filmed her closing her front door in their faces, which probably made a better visual than any interview would have. The segment aired Friday night. By Saturday morning, the story had been picked up by state media. My phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, messages of support, and a few angry calls from people who thought I was manufacturing drama for attention. Sunday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, exhausted from the media circus. "Mr. Quinlan." "This is Deanne Kapoor. I'm an attorney specializing in HOA disputes and volunteer service protections." "I already have a lawyer," I said cautiously. "I'm not looking for your business. I've been following your story in the news." "I work with a nonprofit that provides legal services to volunteers facing retaliation or interference with their service. We'd like to represent you pro bono if you're interested." I sat up straight. "Pro bono? As in free?" "Exactly. Your case touches on issues we care deeply about. HOAs overreaching into emergency services, volunteers being punished for their service. This is exactly the kind of case we exist to fight." We talked for 40 minutes. Deanne explained that her organization, the Volunteer Services Legal Defense Fund, had handled dozens of similar cases. They had a strong track record and the resources to take on protracted legal battles. "We'd file suit this week if you're ready," Deanne said. "Injunction against the fines, declaratory judgment that your beacon is protected under state law, and probably go after them for harassment and abusive process." "What's the catch?" "No catch. We're funded by donations and grants. Our mission is protecting people like you. The only thing we ask is that you let us publicize the case to help raise awareness about these issues." After we hung up, I sat with the decision for about 30 seconds before calling her back. "Let's do it." The lawsuit was filed Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the story had exploded across social media. Local firefighter organizations were sharing it, volunteer groups across Pennsylvania were commenting, and the National Volunteer Firefighters Association issued a statement supporting my case. Wednesday, I got served with papers. Brenda and the HOA were countersuing me for defamation, claiming I damaged their reputation with my media interviews. Deanne laughed when I told her, "That's desperation. They're flailing. Don't worry about it." Thursday morning, 3 members of the HOA board resigned. Gerald Thompson, Lisa Chen, and another board member I barely knew named Michael Foster all submitted resignation letters citing increased personal commitments. The real reason, according to Robert Martinez, who had connections to the board, was that they were getting death threats. People who'd seen the news coverage were calling them at home, sending angry emails, even showing up at their workplaces. I felt a twist of guilt. I'd never wanted that. This was supposed to be about the Beacon, about standing up to bureaucratic overreach. It wasn't supposed to become a mob attacking people. I released a statement through Diane asking people to stay calm and let the legal process work. The harassment died down a bit, but the damage was done. Brenda was the only original board member left. Friday, an emergency HOA meeting was called. The agenda had one item: recall of the remaining board member and election of new leadership. I attended, sitting in the back and trying to stay inconspicuous. The room was packed, easily twice as many people as had come to the previous meeting. Brenda stood at the front, her usual armor of confidence visibly cracked. She looked tired, older than she had 3 weeks ago. "I've served this community for over a year," she began. "Everything I've done has been in accordance with our covenants and in the best interest of property values. The recent media attention has been a coordinated smear campaign by one disgruntled homeowner who refuses to follow the rules everyone else has to follow. He's a firefighter," someone shouted from the audience. "That doesn't put him above the law," Brenda shot back. Dr. Wu stood up. "Mrs. Whitmore, I move that we hold an immediate recall vote on your position as board president." "Seconded," several voices called out. The vote wasn't even close. 93 homeowners present voted to recall Brenda. 12 voted to keep her. She stood at the podium, her face ashen, as the results were announced. "This is a mistake," she said quietly. "You'll regret this." She gathered her papers and walked out. I never saw her at another HOA meeting. New board members were elected that night. Dr. Wu became president. Robert Martinez became vice president. They immediately voted to drop all fines against me and withdraw the HOA's countersuit. "We owe you an apology," Dr. Wu said to me after the meeting. "This should never have happened. The Beacon is clearly protected by state law, and you've been nothing but an asset to this community." "I appreciate that," I said. "I just want to get back to normal life." "About that." Dr. Wu looked embarrassed. "We need to address the legal fees the HOA incurred during this dispute." Brenda authorized payment to Carter and Associates without full board approval. We're looking at nearly $30,000 in legal bills that came out of our reserve fund. I felt my stomach drop. "Are you saying the HOA is going to try to recover that from me?" No. The opposite. We're going to try to recover it from Brenda personally. She exceeded her authority, but I wanted you to know the full scope of the damage she caused. The lawsuit against the HOA was quietly dismissed a week later, with a formal settlement agreement that included an apology letter, acknowledgement that my Beacon was legal and necessary, and a commitment to never again interfere with fire department operations. Diane Kapoor and her organization called it a significant victory for volunteer rights. Several other states started looking at legislation to more clearly protect volunteers from HOA interference. For me, it just felt like relief. The weight I'd been carrying for weeks finally lifted. I could go back to focusing on what actually mattered: my job, my daughter, my service to the community. December arrived with our first major snowstorm. 8 inches fell overnight, and the roads became treacherous by morning. My pager went off at 6 a.m. with a call about a vehicle accident on Route 22. I activated my Beacon before backing out of the garage, the orange light cutting through the swirling snow. As I drove toward the accident scene, I passed two cars that were stuck in ditches, their drivers looking lost and frightened. I couldn't stop. There was an emergency to respond to, but the beacon gave them something to focus on, a reminder that help was nearby, that they weren't abandoned in the storm. The accident turned out to be a semi-truck that had jackknifed across two lanes. The driver was shaken but uninjured. We spent 3 hours managing traffic and coordinating with tow trucks to clear the scene. As I was heading home, exhausted and cold, I got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Yates Quinlan?" A woman's voice, older, uncertain. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Barbara Whitmore." "I'm Brenda's mother." I felt ice form in my chest. "Mrs. Whitmore, what can I do for you?" I wanted to apologize for my daughter's behavior. "I saw the news coverage. I read about what happened." She paused. "Brenda's always been intense, controlling. She was a lawyer before she retired, always had to be right about everything. But what she did to you was wrong." "I appreciate you saying that." "She's not doing well," Barbara continued. "The HOA situation, the publicity, it's taken a toll. She's been diagnosed with depression." "I'm not asking you to forgive her or feel sorry for her. I just wanted you to know that she's a human being, flawed like all of us, and she's suffering for her mistakes." After the call ended, I sat in my truck in my own driveway, the beacon still pulsing above me. I tried to feel satisfaction or vindication, but mostly I just felt tired. Brenda Whitmore had made my life hell for weeks. She'd cost me money, stress, and peace of mind. But she was also someone's daughter, someone struggling with her own demons. Later that week, I drafted a letter. I didn't send it through lawyers or official channels. I just wrote it by hand and mailed it to Brenda's address. "Mrs. Whitmore, I wanted you to know that I don't hold personal animosity toward you. Our dispute was about principles and legal rights, not about you as a person. I hope you find peace and healing. If you ever need help during an emergency, I'll be there, same as I would for anyone in this community. That's what being a firefighter means." I never got a response. I didn't expect one. Christmas came and went. Zoe spent the holidays with me, and we had a quiet celebration free from HOA drama. The beacon stayed mounted on my garage, silent most days but ready when needed. In January, I got a call from Tom Rivera. "Got some interesting news. The state legislature is considering a bill specifically protecting volunteer emergency responders from HOA interference. They're calling it the Volunteer Service Protection Act. Your case was one of the main examples cited." "That's great," I said, meaning it. "There's more. The Pennsylvania Fire Chiefs Association wants to give you an award at their annual conference, Meritorious Service for Advancing Volunteer Rights." I almost laughed. I just wanted to keep my beacon up. Sometimes standing up for yourself helps a lot of other people too. The award ceremony was in March, held at a convention center in Harrisburg. I wore my dress uniform and felt awkward accepting praise for what had felt like a nightmare while I was living through it. But talking to other volunteers afterward, hearing their stories of HOA disputes and local government interference, I realized that my fight had mattered beyond just my personal situation. It had drawn attention to a systemic problem and started conversations about how to fix it. The Volunteer Service Protection Act passed in late April. Governor signed it with fanfare, volunteers from across the state attending the ceremony. The law made it explicitly illegal for HOAs or local governments to prohibit or restrict volunteer emergency responders from having necessary equipment at their homes. My beacon was now protected by state law. So were the beacons and sirens and other equipment of thousands of other volunteers across Pennsylvania. Life settled into a new normal. The HOA under Dr. Wu's leadership was reasonable and responsive. Property values stayed stable despite Brenda's dire predictions. My tires weren't slashed again. The threatening calls and emails stopped. In June, I got a call from a firefighter in Ohio. He was facing an HOA dispute similar to what I'd experienced. Could I offer advice? I spent an hour on the phone with him, sharing what I'd learned, connecting him with Diane Kapoor's organization. Over the following months, I got more calls. Firefighters, EMTs, volunteer police officers, all facing bureaucratic harassment for their service. I helped where I could. It became an unofficial second job, mentoring people through fights I understood too well. Zoe graduated from Penn State that spring. At the ceremony, watching her walk across the stage, I felt overwhelming pride. She'd gotten through college despite the chaos of that winter, despite the financial stress and media attention. "Thanks for not giving up," she told me afterward. "You showed me what it means to stand up for what's right even when it's hard." That summer was peaceful. I worked, I responded to calls, I helped neighbors with their yards and attended community barbecues. The beacon sat on my garage, occasionally activated during summer thunderstorms when visibility dropped and people needed guidance. In August, I ran into Gerald Thompson at the grocery store. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wanted to disappear into the produce section. "Yates," he said stiffly. "How are you, good Gerald?" "You, fine." He hesitated. "Look, I wanted to say, I should have stood up to Brenda earlier. I knew she was going too far, but I went along with it. That was wrong. I appreciate you saying that. You're doing good work with the fire department. We're lucky to have you in the neighborhood." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was genuine. I shook his hand and we parted ways. September brought the first anniversary of my dispute with Brenda. The date passed without fanfare, barely registered. It felt like ancient history. On a Wednesday evening, responding to a call about a lost hiker in the state park, I used my beacon to mark my position for the search and rescue helicopter. The hiker was found safely, reunited with his family, another emergency resolved. Driving home in the twilight, I passed through Maple Ridge Estates and saw the houses lit up with early dinner lights and the glow of televisions. Normal life, the kind I'd fought to preserve. My beacon was dark now, just a piece of equipment waiting for the next time it was needed. No fines, no legal threats, no harassment. Just a tool that helped save lives, exactly as it was supposed to be. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment before heading inside. The whole fight seemed surreal in retrospect. It had consumed weeks of my life, cost thousands of dollars, and created stress that had taken months to fully recover from. But it had also mattered. It had changed laws, helped other volunteers, and proven that ordinary people could stand up to petty tyranny and win. Inside, my phone buzzed with a text from the group chat with my fire department crew. Someone had posted a meme about HOA overreach, tagging me with laughing emojis. I smiled and sent back a thumbs up. That night, the first real cold snap of autumn rolled through. I could feel winter coming in the air, smell it in the sharpness of the breeze. Soon enough, there would be snow and ice, emergencies and late-night calls. The beacon would pulse through blizzards again, a small orange light against the white chaos, guiding people to safety. I'd be ready. The beacon would be ready. And thanks to a fight I'd never wanted to have, no one could take that away. The following weeks brought early winter weather and with it, the usual uptick in emergency calls. I responded to fender benders on icy roads, helped coordinate rescue efforts for stranded motorists, and worked alongside my crew to keep the community safe. Each time I activated the beacon, I thought about how close I'd come to losing it. How a simple piece of equipment had become the center of a legal and personal battle that had reshaped not just my life, but the landscape of volunteer protections across the state. In late October, I received an invitation to speak at a national volunteer firefighter conference in Atlanta. They wanted me to discuss the HOA case and its implications for volunteers nationwide. Public speaking wasn't my strength, but I accepted. This issue mattered too much to let my discomfort hold me back. Zoe helped me prepare the presentation over Thanksgiving weekend. She'd gotten a job with an environmental consulting firm in Philadelphia and was thriving in her career. "You need to start with the personal story," she advised, reviewing my draft slides. "People connect with narrative, not legal statutes. I'm not good at the whole storytelling thing." "Dad, you lived it. Just tell them what happened." The conference was in January. Standing before 200 volunteer firefighters and EMS from across the country, I told my story. The beacon, the threats, the escalation, the legal battle, and ultimately the legislative victory. The response was overwhelming. During the Q&A session, dozens of hands shot up. Person after person shared similar experiences with HOAs, condo associations, and local governments. Many had simply given up and removed their equipment rather than fight. "You gave us hope that we don't have to take that anymore," one woman said. She was a paramedic from Tennessee, fighting her HOA over an ambulance response bag she kept in her vehicle. After the presentation, I spent 3 hours talking with attendees, exchanging contact information, and connecting people with legal resources. Diane Kapoor had flown in for the conference and was busy collecting cases her organization could help with. "This is bigger than we realized," she told me. "There are thousands of volunteers dealing with this kind of harassment. Your case opened the floodgates for people to come forward." Flying home, I felt energized in a way I hadn't expected. The fight with Brenda had been exhausting and miserable while it was happening, but it had sparked something important. A movement of volunteers standing up for their right to serve their communities without interference. Back in Millbrook, life continued. February brought the anniversary of the blizzard that had started everything, when my beacon had helped save that family with the sick child. I never learned their names, never got any follow-up beyond what I'd heard at the time. Then on a Saturday morning in mid-February, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a couple in their 30s standing on my porch, bundled against the cold. They looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. "Mr. Quinlan," the woman said, "I don't know if you remember us. Last year, during the blizzard, our daughter was sick. We got lost trying to find the hospital, and we saw your beacon. You called the ambulance for us." The memory clicked into place. "Of course. How's your daughter?" "She's wonderful. Completely recovered." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "We tried to find you afterward to say thank you, but we didn't know your name or exact address. Then we saw the news stories about your HOA case. We realized you were the man who saved Emma's life." The man held out a card. "We wanted to give you this. It's not much, but we wanted you to know how much that night meant to us." Inside the card was a photo of a little girl, maybe 4 years old, grinning at the camera with a gap-toothed smile. The note read, "Thank you for being Emma's guardian angel. She's thriving because of you." After they left, I sat with that card for a long time. This was why the fight had mattered. Not for recognition or awards or legal precedents, but for moments like this. Real people, real lives, real difference. The winter passed into spring. April brought rain and mud season, the in-between time when the world was neither winter nor summer. I continued my work, both at the engineering firm and with the fire department. Dr. Wu proved to be an excellent HOA president, focused on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement. Under his leadership, The board established a volunteer appreciation program, officially recognizing residents who served in emergency services, taught at schools, or contributed to community organizations. I was recognized at the first ceremony, along with Jessica Hartman, a teacher who ran after-school programs, and 3 other neighbors who volunteered in various capacities. It was a small gesture but meaningful, a complete reversal from the hostility that had defined the HOA under Brenda's leadership. In May, I got word that Brenda had moved out of Maple Ridge Estates. Her house sold quietly, and she relocated to somewhere out of state. I felt a complicated mix of emotions about her departure. Relief, certainly, but also a measure of sadness. She'd lost her community, her position, her reputation, all because she'd been unable to back down from a fight she should never have started. Summer arrived with warmth and long days. I spent more time working on my house, finally fixing that hairline crack in the driveway that had been cited as a violation. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Zoe visited regularly, sometimes bringing friends or a boyfriend she was getting serious with. My house became a gathering place, the way I'd always hoped it would be when I first moved to Maple Ridge Estates. In July, the Pennsylvania Volunteer Firefighters Association held their annual conference in Pittsburgh. I attended as a guest speaker again, this time discussing implementation of the new protection law. Tom Rivera pulled me aside during a break. "I've got some news. The state fire marshal is creating a task force to improve coordination between volunteer departments and local governments. They want you on it." "Why me? I'm just a volunteer captain." "You're the guy who stood up when it mattered. That carries weight." I accepted the position. The task force met quarterly, working on guidelines for equipment authorization, emergency response protocols, and conflict resolution procedures. It was bureaucratic work, less exciting than actual firefighting, but important nonetheless. August brought the 2-year anniversary of when the whole situation with Brenda had started. I marked the date only because Diane Kapoor called to tell me about another legislative victory, this time in Maryland, where a similar protection law had passed using Pennsylvania's statute as a model. "We've had inquiries from 6 more states," Diane said. "Your case keeps opening doors." The beacon remained mounted on my garage, a constant presence. I'd maintained it carefully, replacing bulbs as needed, ensuring it was always ready for deployment. It had activated 17 times in the past 2 years, during snowstorms, severe thunderstorms, and one memorable incident where it had helped guide a medical helicopter to a landing zone near my house for a critical patient transport. Each activation justified its existence, proved the point I'd fought so hard to make. September brought cooler temperatures and the start of another school year. The neighborhood kids returned to their routines, bus stops filling with chatter and backpacks. Life felt stable, predictable in the best way. On a Wednesday evening, I was finishing dinner when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Quinlan, this is Barbara Whitmore. We spoke once before." "Mrs. Whitmore, is everything all right?" "I wanted to let you know that Brenda passed away last week. Heart attack. It was sudden." The news hit harder than I expected. "I'm very sorry for your loss." "Thank you. I know you and Brenda had your difficulties. But I wanted you to know that toward the end, she expressed regret about how things had gone. She never apologized directly, but she told me once that she'd handled the situation poorly." After we said goodbye, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room. Brenda Whitmore had been my antagonist, the source of immense stress and conflict. But she'd also been a person, someone's daughter, someone who'd struggled with her own issues. Her death didn't change what had happened between us, but it added a finality to the story. The conflict was truly over now, not just legally resolved but completed in every sense. I attended the funeral, sitting in the back and slipping out before anyone could question my presence. It felt like the right thing to do, a gesture of closure and shared humanity. October rolled into November. The leaves turned brilliant colors before falling, and I spent weekends raking and preparing for winter. The cycle continued, seasons changing, life moving forward. On the first anniversary of the HOA meeting where everything had come to a head, Robert Martinez organized a neighborhood gathering at his house. It was informal, just neighbors eating burgers and talking, but it felt significant. This community that had been divided by conflict was coming together again. To volunteers, Dr. Wu said, raising a beer, and to standing up for what's right. We clinked bottles and cans, a small ceremony marking how far we'd come. December brought the first snow. I was ready, beacon tested and prepared. The first activation came during a moderate snowfall that reduced visibility but wasn't quite severe enough to shut down the roads. A car pulled into my driveway around 8 p.m., a young couple looking lost and frightened. Their GPS had failed, and they'd been driving in circles for 30 minutes. "We saw your light," the woman said. "We hoped someone could help." I gave them directions, confirmed them on my phone's GPS, and sent them on their way with hot coffee from my thermos. Simple human kindness, enabled by a piece of equipment that had sparked a legal battle and legislative change. As I watched their taillights disappear into the snow, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why I'd fought. Not for awards or recognition, not even for legal precedents, but for moments like this. For the ability to help people when they needed it most. The winter deepened. I responded to calls, helped neighbors, lived my life. The beacon remained on my garage, legally protected, socially accepted, serving its purpose. 3 years after the dispute began, I received an invitation to the White House. The president was hosting a ceremony honoring volunteers who'd made significant contributions to their communities and to volunteer service rights. My name was on the list. Zoe insisted on coming with me to Washington. We made a weekend of it, touring the monuments and exploring the city. The ceremony itself was brief but moving, the president thanking us for our service and for standing up when it mattered. "You remind us that ordinary citizens can make extraordinary differences," the president said in closing remarks. Not through grand gestures, but through persistence, principle, and courage. Flying home, I looked at the certificate I'd been given and thought about how strange life's journey could be. I'd never intended to become an advocate or a symbol. I just wanted to keep a beacon on my garage so I could help people during emergencies. But sometimes standing up for a simple principle leads to larger changes. Sometimes one person's fight becomes everyone's victory. Back in Millbrook, spring arrived with its usual promise of renewal. I planted flowers in my front yard, attended HOA meetings that were actually productive, and continued my work with the fire department. Tom Rivera retired that June, and the department voted me in as chief. It was an honor I'd never sought but accepted with humility. The responsibility was significant, but I was ready under my leadership. We expanded our volunteer training programs, improved our equipment, and strengthened our relationships with neighboring departments. The work was demanding but fulfilling. Zoe got engaged that summer. Her fiancé was a good man, an environmental lawyer who shared her passion for making the world better. They planned a spring wedding. Life continued its forward motion. Years passed. The beacon remained, a silent sentinel on my garage, activating when needed and otherwise sitting dormant. It had become such a normal part of the landscape that neighbors barely noticed it anymore. But I never forgot what it represented: the fight for the right to serve. The principle that community safety matters more than aesthetic preferences. The truth that ordinary people can stand against bureaucratic bullying and win. On the 10-year anniversary of the dispute's resolution, I was invited to speak at a gathering of HOA reform advocates. The movement had grown far beyond what I'd imagined, encompassing not just volunteer protections but broader reforms to limit HOA overreach and abuse. It started with a beacon, I told the audience. A simple orange light meant to help people find safety in a storm. But it became about something larger, about the right to serve our communities without fear, about standing up to petty tyranny, about remembering that rules should serve people, not the other way around. The applause was warm and sustained. After the speech, dozens of people came up to share their own stories of HOA disputes, volunteer struggles, and small victories against bureaucratic excess. Driving home that night, I passed through Maple Ridge Estates, still my home after all these years. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people felt safe and supported. My beacon was dark as I pulled into my driveway, just a piece of equipment waiting for the next time it was needed. But it was there, legally protected and socially accepted, ready to serve. Inside my house, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the street where I'd fought a battle I'd never wanted. The fight had cost me time, money, and peace of mind. But it had also taught me about resilience, community, and the power of standing firm on principle. Most importantly, it had protected my ability to help people. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The beacon remained on my garage, a symbol of service, persistence, and the truth that sometimes the smallest lights shine brightest in the darkest storms.